Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Insight interviews of the Shia Research Institute. My name is Sajjad Rizvi. I am a professor of Islamic intellectual history at the University of Exeter in England. And today I'm going to be in conversation with Dr. Eliza Tasbihi, who is a curator of the Islamic Manuscripts at McGill and also part-time lecturer at Concordia University. Welcome, Eliza.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for agreeing to do this. We're going to be talking in particular about a recent article that Eliza has written called Visionary Perceptions Through Cosmological Diagrams, Mystical Knowledge from Haydar Amuli's Nas al-Nusus fi Sharh Fusus al-Hikam. So most of our conversation, of course, will be about that. But what I want to do is I want to start off by asking you a bit about your journey, so to speak. Tell us a bit about your research interests and how it is that you came to be interested in Sayyid Haydar Amuli.
Thank you. Well, the journey started from the time that I was doing my PhD and I was working on Rumi's Masnavi in Ottoman context. And I noticed that not just Ottoman Rumi scholars, but even Indian subcontinent scholars such as Akbar Abadi, Bali Akbar Abadi, and Bahrul Ulum, they all read Masnavi through the prism of Ibn Arabi. And I did a little bit search and I noticed that in fact they wrote a commentary on Fusus, and then they came back and they interpreted Rumi, or they read Rumi, or they understood Rumi through the lens of Akbarian lens, and that's how they introduced this new Rumi to the audience. So I tried to finish my research, but I had it in my mind that I need to go back to Ibn Arabi and to see if there is a common ground between Rumi and Ibn Arabi, because the language is different. The terminologies of Sufism that they both use are different. Rumi was Khurasani Sufi, an Ash'arite. Ibn Arabi was more standing on the philosophy, or as Corban says, theosophical aspect. So the language was completely different. And then I looked at a couple of commentaries, and looking at the Fusus, I noticed that, okay, it's a very condensed book. I was looking for different commentaries on Fusus. And that took me to Haydar Amuli, an Iranian, a Shia commentator, and I thought that would be a very interesting blend to see how a Shia theologian would understand a Sunni text. So I started working on...
and sorry to interrupt, but of course, one assumes that Henri Corbin was part of this, because of course Corbin famously did edit the work of Sayyid Haydar, and of course he identified him as a very important commentator. And then of course there's a certain McGill lineage through Professor Herman Landolt, who we know very well. One of the leading students of Corbin.
That's very true. And Corbin was very famous in Iran because of Sayyid Hossein al-Nasr at the time of, before Islamic Revolution. They had the Institute of Philosophy they established, and Corbin would come, had a regular talk and lecture with Tabatabai, the Mufassir of Quran. So Iranians are very familiar with Corbin. And as part of that Tehran Institute of Philosophy, they started editing lots of major groundbreaking works and major texts, Sufi texts, Shia texts. And Corbin had this tendency towards Shi'ism, and he would be, in fact, he has a theory about the school of Isfahan. So we won't go there. So I'm going to focus more on Haydar Amuli. Yes, definitely, I noticed Corbans Edition, among other works. But then I had a conversation with the late Leonard Lewison, so I would like to pay my tribute. I thank him, and during the series of conversation, and I explained my interest to Fusus al-Hikam, and I want to learn about Ibn Arabi, Fusus al-Hikam, why, that was the question, why he divided into 27 chapters, why this specific 27 prophets. I understand the last one is the prophet of Islam, seal of the prophethood, Khatamun Nabiyyun. That's for sure. But why? The first one, Adam, that's again is easy to understand. Why he picked some of those as manifestation of divine revelations? What was his logic in dividing? What kind of sign or numerology he was thinking? So I really thought about the sign and number. It came in our conversation, and Lenny guided me toward the dawair, the circle, the cosmographical circles at the end of Haydar Amuli's commentary. I looked at Corbans Edition. I noticed that some of the dawair are not so clear, so I managed to acquire a copy from Istanbul. But Haydar Amuli is not just famous because of the commentary that he wrote. He is famous because of his idea, and that made it more pleasant for me to work, because I come from a Sufi background in terms of my research. And Haydar Amuli is a friend of Sufis. He's not just a Shia, even though he is a Shia scholar. But I don't know, can I speak a little bit about his ideas?
Yes, of course, please do. Please do.
Yes, continuing the journey. The journey became more interested when I noticed that, okay, even though the commentary is very rich and opening and talking through theological and Shia language, but he brings Sufi ideas. So I went and I looked at some other works of him, especially Jami' al-Asrar, which is his doctrine or his manifestation of Shia Sufi, what he thinks of Shi'ism. And here, basically, he said Shi'ism and Sufism are the two sides of a coin, if I want to put it in a very simple way. Those Sufis who think that Shi'as, Shia Imams basically, don't have spiritual revelation, they are wrong. Or Shi'as, those Shia who think that saints, Sufi saints, cannot be Imam, or they are not familiar, or they are deviated from fiqh, they are wrong. So basically, he would summarize as every Shia is a Sufi, every true Shia is a Sufi, every true Sufi is a Shia, because of the divine spirituality and divine knowledge that they have. So that's the common ground. So that was more interesting, and plus, he has done groundbreaking works. He has written a commentary on Quran, Muhit al-Azam, Sharh Asrar, Jami' al-Asrar, when he talks about Shi'ism and Sufism, and a commentary on Ibn Arabi. So that makes him well qualified as a significant and major figure, influential figure, actually. I would say many scholars, Qajar scholars, Safavid scholars, were influenced by Haydar Amuli. So that was my initiation.
And even, I guess, if you look at modern scholarship, so when people think of Shi'i Sufism, they usually think of Sayyid Haydar. You know, like, for example, there are a number of works. I'm thinking of Khanjar Hamiya's Al-Irfan al-Shi'i, which is, you know, probably the definitive work in Arabic on Sayyid Haydar. And then there's, you know, very similar titles of works in Persian. There is, of course, Qasim Khakai's work on Sayyid Haydar as well. So, you know, I think there is already a very strong sense in modern scholarship that if you really want to understand what Shi'i Sufism can mean, and this in itself is a difficult one. I mean, if I asked you what is Shi'i Sufism, that's a big question.
Yes,
but,
definitely.
But in many ways, a simple answer is it's Sayyid Haydar.
Yes, he simplified, he explained, and he worked on it, and he looked at some texts and commented from a Sufi perspective or from Shia perspective, bringing some Sufi elements. So that makes it more interesting and easy to understand, or at least easy to connect. Maybe not easy to understand, but easy to connect with Haydar Amuli, how he looks at it and how he, at least with Fusus al-Hikam. As you know, it's not a very easy book to deal with when it comes to the divine manifestation for each prophet. You have these definitions and characterization and how he interpret this, look at it from the Shia perspective. It made it more accessible for me, at least it helped. And another aspect that he mentioned, which I found it very interesting, he really put himself at the same line or at the same shoes of Ibn Arabi. Very comfortably, he spoke. He said, the same way that Shaykh al-Akbar claimed that the book of Fusus al-Hikam came to me from the Prophet, and I received, I did the justice that I could do. I wrote it. It came to me as a dream. I wrote a commentary to give it to people. So I was a medium between the Prophet and people when it comes to, in regard to Fusus al-Hikam. But then I wrote Futuhat al-Makkiyah. That came directly through the divine inspirations. And then, so that was my work in direct connection with God, with the divine, and I gave it to people. So Haydar Amuli took this and he said the same way I would say that I took Fusus al-Hikam from Shaykh al-Akbar. I wrote the commentary, gave it to people. And the Quran commentary that I wrote, Muhit Azam, it was the divine inspiration that I got from God. And again, I wrote it and gave it to public. And of course, Prophet Muhammad would be in between the divine revelation that he has. The Quran comes directly, and then he passed on Fusus al-Hikam and his words to his Sahaba or his other saints, his awliya. So in that sense,
I mean, one of the interesting things, of course, about that work, both the Quran commentary as well as the commentary in the Fusus, is that as they have survived, they are both incomplete. So do you have any sense of why that might be?
With the Fusus, I have some ideas based on the materials that they talk, of course, because they deal with divine manifestation. The same way that we say Quran remains intact from any damage or any
emission, any tampering.
Tampering. I was looking for the word tamperings, but I wasn't sure. Yeah, any tampering. I would say maybe because of the nature of the work and the connection that he has with the divine, either through the prophet or direct the vision that he had, and he was faithful in receiving. For example, in the case of, for example, Haydar Amuli, one of the diagrams is exactly based on his vision. Yeah. So what he sees, exactly he reflects on that, right, without any modification. So, and then other commentators or other scholars look at it the way it is. Maybe the nature, because it has to do with the divine manifestation, God's word, and Quran, borrows from Quran and Prophet. So maybe it's that one. Yeah, that's right.
I mean, I guess one other possibility, especially with the Quran exegesis, is that maybe it was never actually planned in the way we think of it, of an exegesis. So we normally consider, an exegesis to be a comprehensive commentary on every verse, right? But we have, of course, plenty of other examples where it's not the comprehensive nature of the exegesis which is important, but it's the introduction and what they think exegesis is. So that's why, as you know, the majority of the exegesis which survives is actually the introduction, which tells you what exegesis is and how to do it and so forth. So, out of the 8 volumes or so which are published of Haydar Amuli's exegesis, barely 1 volume is actually an exegesis. The rest is all introduction.
Introduction. Yeah, that could, definitely that could explain.
Let me, before we come to the diagrams and the article in particular, maybe if I can ask you something a bit more about, in a sense, the title and some of the language used in the article. So you use the term visionary perceptions, and you and many others often, when they talk about Haydar Amuli, when they talk about Sufism, they use the term esoteric to describe what is going on. So first, can you just tell us a bit about, how do you understand this term esoteric? And then how do you understand this term visionary perception?
Yeah. By esoteric, my own understanding is something has to do with meaning, with inner, something which is not revealed to anybody, which is not accessible to anybody. And the diagram tells the sign language, letterism, occultism. Even in Sufis, among Sufis of Khurasan, the poets, for example, Attar and Rumi, they don't use letterism, they don't use occult language. They explain, let's say, Quranic verses. In Rumi's Masnavi we have. He explains and then he stops, he pauses, he looks at the audience, he evaluates the capacity of the audience, and he says, I better stop here. We have Fakhruddin Iraqi, we have so many Sufis, whether in the form of prose or poetry, when they talk about Sufism, or they are talking about revelation, or they want to reveal some inner knowledge. that they was revealed to them through kashf, through mushahada, let's say, through their own meditation or hard work or divine effusion. So they don't want to give it to everybody. It's not that because they're stingy. They think that maybe people don't have the capacity. So when we talk about esotericism, is the spirituality that is hidden, it's related to God. You need to know that knowledge. It's not for everybody, as Haydar Amuli discusses. So by esoteric, I mean spiritual knowledge, but something that really relates to the truth, to God, and to the divine and the divine attributes. That's what.
But also, I mean, there's potentially a bit of a paradox when we talk about esoteric knowledge, because it's just very much this idea of something which is particular to the spiritual state of an individual. But it's at the same time quite difficult to see how you communicate that. And that's the fundamental problem, right? Because the idea is the spiritual experience in and of itself is not, it's not propositional, it's not discursive, it doesn't have a language as such. And then to kind of translate that into a language which can try to capture that is always going to be difficult.
That's very true. The thing is, the source is one. They all were Muslims. Now, whether Sunni or Shia, they believe in the Quran as the source of Wahy and the divine revelation, and they believe in Prophet.
Right.
So, Sufis, most of these Sufis, okay, Ibn Arabi would be on a different line, more theoretical Sufism that he presents. But most Sufis, Iranian Sufis or Baghdadi Sufis, such as Al-Hallaj, Shibli, Junaid, they were more into practice. That's very true that every individual has its own journey. That's very true. Bottom line is a connection with God. And for everyone, there is a different path, different experience. You're very right. But since all these paths lead to one source, and their attempt, their effort is to learn and to understand that source, the language that they use to express their feeling, their hal, the spiritual state would be different.
And of course, I guess the notion of esoteric brings to mind the concept of ta'wil as well. So could you say something about ta'wil?
Yeah, ta'wil. Well, if you are looking at it from the Shia perspective or from fiqh perspective, Islamic law perspective, not everyone is in favor of ta'wil, because again, ta'wil would be kind of individual interpretation of, whereas those who follow Sharia or Islamic law, they would say certain rules, certain laws, certain regulations, certain principles are not open to personal interpretation. That would cause deviation or misunderstanding. It depends on who makes ta'wil, who's qualified to make ta'wil. Should we look at it in what context we call it ta'wil? In some Sufi text, ta'wil might answer and might have, but again, if it's one's attempt to understand God and he makes his own ta'wil, and that ta'wil helps him or facilitates his journey, I would say it worked for him.
Well, I mean, Sayyid Haydar famously says that if you want to do ta'wil, I mean, there's a wider issue of, where does it come from? So there is, in pretty much every Sufi context, ta'wil and esoteric knowledge goes back to Ali, right?
That's very true, yes.
And that's because of the famous prophetic saying, just as I have fought for the revelation, you will fight for the ta'wil,
yes.
Right? But aside from that, in the introduction to his exegesis, Sayyid Haydar actually identifies two works which he thinks are fundamental. He mentions the Ta'wilat Najmiya, which is a Kubrawi text.
Kubrawi, yeah.
And he also mentions the Ta'wilat of Abdul Razak Kashani.
Kashani, yes.
So, I mean, that's quite revealing, because they're both works of Ta'wil, but they're quite distinct as well. One is much more, I guess, metaphysical, which is a Kashani.
Yeah.
And arguably the Kubrawi text is much more experiential. and about kind of vision. Exactly. Yeah. So, and like,
let's go to
comes
visionary.
the vision. Exactly. So if you, that's a good segue into
Visionary.
explaining what visionary perception is.
Again, individual based on ta'wil, mainly based on dream. In the dream, the truth, or it's a journey that Haydar Amuli take part, and in the dream, certain inspiration, divine inspiration came to him to understand the meaning of those words, or to learn, because he would say we have three different knowledge of God, knowledge of word, knowledge of human being. To understand the absolute truth, or to get close to God, even through the dawair, he explains, you need to know the nature, the word, macrocosm, microcosm, the mankind. In fact, we have a famous hadith that whoever knows himself, man arafa nafsah faqad arafa rabbah. So he was pro-dream, and he reflects his knowledge, what he understood in the dream, what was revealed through dream in form of dawair, in form of shape, sign. And for that reason, he says, it came to me. Doesn't mean that it would come to you the same way. And he wouldn't make it accessible equally to everyone. That's one of the reasons he represent or reflect or present his understanding or his divine perceptions in the form of signs, symbols, shape.
Before we continue on the question of symbols and signs, I think it might be worth clarifying dream, because of course one of the problems is in our ordinary language, we think of dreams as some sort of progression of our psychology or something, and something which is somewhat fictional, right? But of course, in the way you're talking about dreams and the way Sufis talk about dreams, they're talking about a vision of reality, right? So it's not something which is falsifiable. It's not something which is fictional, but is actually a revelation of truth. I think it's just worth clarifying.
That's very true.
That issue.
In fact, in one of the circles that he explains, especially on the journey of Prophet Muhammad, he explains different stages. That dream, that vision doesn't appear right away. You have to take those steps. You have to work on it. And at the last stage, it's a sort of dream. If I'm not wrong, in Persian we call it ruya sadiqa. So it's something that
a veridical or true dream.
So, or vision, if you use the simple word.
I think vision actually might be more clarifying in the sense that it's a vision of reality.
Vision of reality.
Because the dream doesn't actually even have to be related to sleeping states.
No, it's not the same. I use the word dream just as an example.
When we use the term dream, we're talking about sleeping states, but in these cases, we're not necessarily talking about sleeping always.
It's a revealing, it's a realization, it's a state of realization. You might be sleeping, but in fact, you left all the physical senses behind. You don't see in a sense of physical seeing or physical. So basically, you are in full constant attention to God and nothing else. That revelation and that vision comes when you leave the world of physics behind. Not just physics, like completely leaving physics. All attention, all the spirit, sense of purification that you are capable of or you're ready to receive that knowledge. So that would be vision. It's a very, I would say, spiritual state. One needs to work on that.
Yeah, so it's this classic
to practice.
Kind of, push and pull. So you do spiritual practices as a preparation for receiving inspiration.
Yes.
Receiving the vision.
Could be meditation, could be prayer. It depends on which school one belongs, or constant reading, maybe a Quran or having a teacher. It depends. Again, kind of ta'wil. Everyone has its own method. Yeah. But at the end, if person reaches that and goal, it depends what is the goal of the person, whether he or she really wants to grasp that. If the intention is, Sufis would say, it will be revealed. In fact, the first step is the call from God. In the Mi'raj, we see that in the diagram that he explains.
Yeah, and that's also why, as you know, in most Sufi orders, when they talk about the different stages on the path, one of the early stages is turning towards God. The tawbah, which is the turning towards God. in the sort of seeking something and their response. Okay, so in terms of, so you've said that these diagrams are the result of visionary perceptions or result of visions. But maybe you could say a bit more about their function in the work, like more generally, because it's not just in the Nas and Nusus and the commentary and the Fusus that he uses diagrams. He uses them in other works of his as well. So what is the role of that? Some people have used the term mandalas as well to describe I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, Corban uses the term mandala.
Corban uses mandala-like.
Exactly.
I looked at mandala usually, as you know, it comes from Eastern tradition, like Buddhism, Hinduism. It's a bit different mandala with the visionary cosmographical diagram. In cosmographical diagram, Haydar Amuli deals with the word. Most of them come in a pair series. Word of physics or corporeal word of a spirit. And there is a connection between them. Whereas in mandala, yes, it is in a circular form, but it's a combination of different shape, different symbols, and usually it reflects a spiritual journey, mandala, and it comes from outer to the inside, to the center. That's one of the main differences. It looks like mandala, but since Haydar Amuli deals with the word, inner word, microcosm and macrocosm, so he uses da'ira, and that's how, based on the concept of universe, inner word and outer is exterior, interior, I used cosmographical.
Right. Because also sometimes I guess the word mandala and similar words like talisman, etc., they evoke this idea of occult practice. But we're not really talking about occult practice. We're not saying, for example, that I say the Haydar is saying use these diagrams to channel some sort of occult power.
He doesn't use letterism. As you know, at the time of, let's say, Sajjad, even Hassan Sabbah, we have information that in his castle, he would use certain sign language for assassin at the time. Yeah. So after Mongols, it was very common practice, letterism, ilmul huruf. I know couple of our friends and scholars work, Matmel Ben Kushki, so many people. It's now
and actually the obvious comparison, so if you compare Sayyid Haydar's comment in the Fusus with, say, Ibn Turka's comment.
Ibn Turka's,
Ibn Turka's comment in the Fusus is completely letterist.
Yes.
It's a very different kind of commentary.
Exactly. He doesn't mention ilmul huruf, however, he brings huruf. He brings those 19 letters from Quran.
Right. Yeah.
So in action, he does it, but he doesn't say it. The only thing, he kept mentioning dawair. And why he uses da'ira, he says, I am using this as an aid. In mandala, it's a form of meditation for people.
Of course.
But here, Haydar clearly says, I am using da'ira to illustrate, to make it more visible, the vision or what I have in my mind, and translate what Ibn Arabi had in his mind, more illustrative, in a form of more illustrative way. It makes it more easy, yet he makes it very clear. He says, I want to make sure that not everyone can get this. I keep it in a form of sign so people can work on it to unravel, to deduce the meaning that I present.
It does have a pedagogical function, but it's also kind of a puzzle.
Yes.
Certainly when you see most of these, and you will see them once this podcast goes live, they're very busy. Most of these, it's very difficult to take it in.
Definitely.
There's so much material in them, and it certainly requires a working through to understand what's actually even going on. How do these different elements relate to each other? Is it going outward? Is it going inwards? Which directionality is it? Why the choice of a circle? Is it because a circle constitutes a unity? There's all these sorts of issues.
Very, very simple answer for the circle, because it's a common fact that God created universe in his own shape. That's what he says in Quran. And it's not linear, because with linear you start from one point and keep going. But with circle you start from one. It's like Qawwal Ghawsain. You come from God. It's like concept of eschatology. We come from him, we go back to him.
And then ascend.
Yes.
Exactly.
So when you look at the circle, everything is from him, in fact. The whole world is illusion. So we come from him. That's why he uses. And he says the perfect shape from the mathematical or geometrical perspective would be circle, not the line. Even though in one of the diagram, the Shia diagram that I'm going to explain if we have time, he uses a square shape. But again, within the square, he uses the circles.
I mean, I will ask you about specific diagrams, but let me just ask one other kind of question, and you already touched on it. This is the concept of journey, both Mi'raj and also the 4 journeys. Now, of course, I raised 4 journeys because I mentioned that. That's Mullah Sadr much later. But of course, we know that this idea of the 4 journeys is already there in the Ibn Arabi tradition before Mullah Sadr picks it up. So could you say something about the Mi'raj as a kind of paradigmatic journey and this idea of the 4 journeys within Sayyid Haydar's cosmology?
In the diagram, so hopefully later on we'll show it to the audience. The diagram is divided into 2 halves, 2 semi-sphere. One represents the divine, the other represents prophet. So it's a spiritual journey of Prophet Muhammad. Scholars are divided on whether this is in flesh and spirit, or just in spirit, or it's a state of mind. Philosophers such as Ibn Sina would think that this is just an intellectual journey. Hopefully my article comes. I wrote an article for the Encyclopedia of Oxford on Mi'raj. It's a comprehensive article. It examines all these ideas about Mi'raj, whether literature or prose or philosophical or theological sources. In brief, usually philosophers believe that because of the concept of intellect and their fascination with intellect and the universal intellect, and since they accept Prophet Muhammad as the perfect human being, Insan al-Kamil, they would claim that it was an intellectual journey. Whereas theologians such as Ibn Arabi would say no, it was just a spiritual journey to purify him, to make him ready, to make him close to God, and be more capable of revealing and accepting and understanding those divine revelations. Most Shia scholars would say that no, this was both in flesh and in spirit. So Prophet really journeyed. Now there are disagreements whether he left from his Kaaba or from Hani's place to Jerusalem and then from Jerusalem. And we have different verses in Quran that talks about Mi'raj. And Angel Gabriel accompanied him, and other prophets would accompany him. But when he reached really a certain age, they couldn't come with him, and he experienced the divineness. Now, that part is the part that Haydar Amuli discusses in this diagram. The moment that he's alone.
Yeah.
And he talks about Qaba Qawsayn, 2 hemisphere, 2 semicircle.
Yeah.
In one hand, he says we have the necessity of existence. He uses Ibn Sina's word, which is very interesting. And that shows influence of Ibn Sina here. Wajib al-wujud, mumkin al-wujud. He would say possibility of existence and necessity of existence would be God, and possibility would be Prophet Muhammad. In this journey that moves toward the divine, he is a human being, and he does this journey in the world of nature, and he is in the body. And he talks about 4 steps of this journey, which it's possible that later on Mullah Sadr read this and reformed, because even with Ibn Sina, Mullah Sadr changed certain ideas of Wajib al-Wujud. So here we have 4 steps of journey. The first one, like any other Sufis, would believe that it should be based on inayah, God's calling. Yeah. Of course,
providential,
it's not that,
kind of,
Yeah, but person should work on that too. The person should want that. I remember William Chittick I attended one of his talk, and he was talking about love in Sufism, in Rumi's Masnavi. He says many people, of course in Quran, yuhibbuhum wa yuhibbunahum, God created universe based on love. He says no, if we don't return the love, God wouldn't love us.
Yeah, because
It says
it's not
it
love
goes
if it's
together.
not, if it's not reciprocal, it's not love.
Yeah, exactly. So I would like to use the same thing. If we don't want to know the truth, if we don't want to learn about anything about God or the divine names or the divinity, or if we don't want to get close to him, he wouldn't call us. So he puts the first stuff, haraka, the suluk, going toward God. So that's what Prophet Muhammad did. In the journey, he wanted. So some people might say that, okay, he was chosen, he was selected as a unique one, why not others? But he really wanted to. So I believe Haydar Amuli emphasized on that. This is very important because the journey is for everybody.
Right.
That's what I like.
Yeah.
So the first step would be the suluk, the sayr, the haraka, the journey itself. You go toward God. And then the second part, you try to focus, not to distract yourself. Of course, he uses different words, sayr ilallah. I don't want to use the Arabic terms. I'm just explaining what it is. So you go toward God. The second one, you are in the state of jam. You are with him. You try not to be distracted with him. The third journey, which this da'ira is on, which I call it fana, annihilation, you are with God. You have the journey. You pass the journey. You make the journey. And now you are in the constant concentration with God. You are not distracted with anything. You are leaving all the senses behind.
Right.
Even though you are in the physic, you are living with the physic, even if your spirit goes to this journey, if we want to say this is Ibn Arabi's understanding or theory, even with the spirit, we can get the distraction. We can be, even with the dream, as you just mentioned. So he's not distracted. So that would be really the state of annihilation. You're getting united to God. And then the last stage, he uses baqa. You are staying with God.
Yeah.
Substitution. So that's a kind of reward that lasts longer. Now, the main question is, now we're going to discuss whether this is for everybody or not. The main question is, how many times we step on this journey? Is it just one in our lifetime? So some people don't take this journey. This journey is not for everybody. It's for whoever wants to experience it. Now, if somebody experienced it, so for Prophet apparently it took one night or hours or times of the night, because when he came back, according to his wife, the bed was hot.
Yes.
So he was there. So maybe we cannot measure it with our how many minutes, so that shows he really left in physics and he came back. What I'm trying to say is we can't just stay confident that we are just blessed and one journey immunes us. We are immune from any other ego or any other distraction in life. It doesn't work like that. Because even in Quran says everything is in motion. Even God's grace is in motion. So this distraction, because we have the nafs, we have the ego. So we are having our daily life. So we are in the danger of being distracted. My understanding from this daira, yes, it happened for Prophet. He set the example for his awliya, and the awliya are the mediator between the Prophet and other people who want to experience based on their capacity. They can do that. It's just that not just once, because we have many Sufi anecdotes that if Sufis embark on this kind of journey, they can't be just arrogant and say that, okay, now I am immune, I have the blessing of God. And the Prophet's life himself, when he had that conversation with that blind man, we have it in the hadith that the blind man came and asked the question, and Prophet was busy with the Quraysh leaders and kind of didn't respond right away. Let me put it this way. So even Prophet, he says, I am a human being like you. So we all need this constant movement, constant effort to be blessed or to get guidance or get divine attention. That's what I'm trying to say.
Let me move on to a couple of the related diagrams, which are about the spiritual hierarchy. So these are like diagrams 8 and 9. And And it brings us back to this idea of homology, which you've already talked about between macrocosm and microcosm. So, you know, diagram 8 is about, you know, the stations of the zodiac, the
Word of
months.
form.
Yeah, the sort of the form of that.
Yes.
And then the 9th one is
Spiritual.
a sort of spiritual hierarchy of the prophets
Visionary
and the
perception.
saints and so forth. So if you could maybe explain something about, you know, the relationship between those two and what you think is going on in these two.
A lot is going
Yes,
on.
obviously. I mean, they're very busy.
Yes,
and
busy.
And also with, you know, these obviously come from the manuscript. They're quite difficult to read. You have to kind of look very carefully with a magnifying glass.
I had to turn the manuscript.
You have to turn it around.
Yes, so you have to turn it around. At least it's written.
And also the shikaste that it's written in as well.
Well, I mean, if you practice, I
know, but you just have to magnify it to see it properly.
Yes. So I saved the manuscript in the cell phone, and I print it, I return it around so I could read it. So when you start reading one by one, then you know that what is it about. So then it's easier to follow. The first one, number 8, let's just use number.
Okay.
That would be easier. Number 8 is the word of form or physic, exterior. The other one, number 9, interior, word of spirit. Haydar Amuli would say that to understand God, because everything is a manifestation of God, even the word of nature. Okay? And the diagram 8 is about nature, is about creation. Because we live in the world, we live in nature, we as a human being who are in this journey of learning about God. So he says everything, every planet. Now, I think also this is the influence of Greek Ptolemy, that we see 7 planets, for example. Yes. This is an old tradition of science of physics and even medicine, that 4 elements, you know, fire. So he uses that. That's fine. That's fine. It's okay. I know that the science has changed. But even he uses that old language, he plays with the word, he chooses 19 elements here. Right. Natural elements and the zodiac signs. Why zodiac? Because they influence. Everyone is born. The reference is to God. God is at the center, Tawheed. He creates. He's the creator. So everyone is created based on some sign, let's say, in different month, in different day. So months, elements, nature, every object is doing something. They are God commanded on every object to do certain things. So the world's affair comes in order. That's what he's trying to say. He says when we look at the world, we are part of this world, we are living here, we are looking at the planets. Sun, for example. He assigns intellect to sun.
Yeah.
The most important
because it illuminates.
Yeah, because of the illumination and light versus darkness, you know, knowledge versus ignorance. So we can interpret it in different ways. So for each, he attributes certain divine sign, divine knowledge, and says everything is in constant motion and everything has a job to make the world, the affair, in order. So God continues with creation. Because, as I said in Quran, we have a verse that the creation is non-stop. It comes. It doesn't stop.
I mean, that's very important for the Ibn Arabi tradition.
Yeah. It reflects on that. Yeah. So he says, okay, in one hand, we have the world, we have the planet, we have the spheres, we have the zodiac signs, something that relates to us. We are born. And to be able to continue, we need the moon. We need the sun. Based on his own language as he speaks. Yeah. I mean, I don't think we should take it really like sometimes we say like a whack. It can be modified. But based on his own understanding of the universe, based on the knowledge he got from Aristotle, let's say, from the Greek science or Ibn Sina, this is how he sees the world. But what he brings here is number 19, even though he doesn't talk about Ilm al-Huruf. But this is what I deduced from here. So in the table that I draw from this diagram, you see the sign Aries, Taurus, Gemini. These are the zodiac signs. Yeah. For each, there are characteristics from different verses of Quran, like Zari'at, those who drive away, those who reveal. So for each, you see on the diagram on table 1, I have that. So this is his understanding, his ta'wil. This is his interpretation that every element for sun, there is some attribution based on the degree of their influence on action in the world, how much we need them in this balance. So in one diagram, we have the world of nature, tabi'iyat. On the other one, it says we are human being, spirit. So as a human being, we need this nature. The nature needs to work in balance. But as a human being, we need guidance. So God, it's again like that 10 divisions that Abyssinia has. Aqlul Awwal, the first intellect, until the 10th intellect. That's how I understood from this.
Right.
We have certain prophets that are capable of receiving direct revelation. Then after prophet, we have awliya. Then after awliya, other people. For example, in Khurasani Sufis, we have Bayazid Bastami, who has his own Mi'raj. And wrote in the genre of Mi'raj Nama is a common genre in Persian literature. So the door of Mi'raj and experiencing spiritual journey is open for everybody. Everyone based on their capacity. So this shows that hierarchy, that we need that guidance. And in the article, I explained that God calls himself Wali because it's an attribute of God, not Nabi. Nabi comes to be extended. And it comes in a short time. We have certain Nabi, but the door of Wilaya is not closed. It continues because these are friends of God. Awliyas are friends of God, and God have chosen them. And according to Haydar Amuli, awliya are the one that are chosen. They are special people, and they have this vision to understand the knowledge of God. And again, based on capacity of people, they pass on this knowledge.
So the mention of awliya, naturally brings me to the other two I want to discuss, which is 6 and 7. And that's where you have the discussion of the awliya, and particularly the interesting thing is the central role of Fatima al-Zahra, the daughter of the Prophet.
In the other diagrams 10 and 11, one again would have the Prophet. He chooses 7 prophets and 12 awliyas for each. You have the name of Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, Adam, Noah, Abraham, and David. And the rest would be the awliya. Now, what is interesting is the awliya that he chooses the awliya of Prophet Muhammad, which is the last prophet, and the awliya of Adam, who is the first prophet. This is my understanding, because the awliya of our prophets are not fit. At least he doesn't mention. He talks about it in the book, but he doesn't put it in the diagram. Or maybe he couldn't fit them in the diagram. But again, explain that the first prophet, the Adam that comes, and then after that, the seal of the prophet would be Prophet Muhammad. So in diagram 8-10, we have the position and the function of these prophets. They are the qutb, and this is Ibn Arabian term, that he talks about qutb and abdad and afrad. Again, that hierarchy. Who is the closer in receiving the divine revelations? And who are the next one? Like the afrad, and that the 4 ones, which relates to the 4 corners of Kaaba, they are the protectors, they are the supporters. So later on, he goes to Abdals, the 7 ones, which comes, according to Haydar Amuli, they are the awliyas. And for him, the awliyas are the Shi'a. It comes from the lineage of Prophet Muhammad. In the other, diagram 11, for each, in diagram 10, we have the name of these prophet and his awliya, their awliyas, as the mediator, as the awliyas that they can help us to embark on this journey and understand, and they keep the balance by guiding humanity and receiving the divine. In diagram 11, he reflects again, this is really reading Fusus al-Hikam. In each chapter of Fusus, you have certain divine attributes given to Prophet
associated
Muhammad,
with the Prophet.
to each prophet. Here, for each elements, there is a divine character based on the letter of Basmala. That comes because it's the heading of Quranic chapters, except Tawbah, the Repentant. So he uses, because according to his explanation, each chapter starts with Basmala. That means God reveals his blessing. God gives his blessing and grace to any occasion that he wants to talk to the Prophet. So each letter carries the divine attributes. The letter is connected to the blessing or the grace, the divine grace of God, and each letter is associated to every element that you see in the diagram 11. Bottom line, when he attributes these elements and these letters, he says you need this divineness. And the other one, the other pair, God gives them the command. God tells sun or God tells moon what to do. They have their objects. Yeah. They accept, but they have intellects. Humanity have intellects, so they involve. They have the will, power of will. So based on what they do, God assigned them certain divine attributes, and they carry that and they reflect that. And that reflection comes through the vision to other people. That's my understanding.
And so on diagram 7, yeah,
that's the last diagram that I looked at it. It's the diagram that, interestingly, it comes in the form of a square with circles, inner circle and outer circle. So you see the name of Prophet Muhammad. At the top, you see the name of Fatima, which I found it very interesting. And instead of having Prophet Muhammad on the top, you have Fatima. In the other diagrams, we don't have Fatima's name. But here, he talks about awliya from the lineage of Prophet Muhammad. He could have just mentioned Muhammad Ali and the rest of lineage. Sure. But he put Fatima. In fact, there is a hadith narrated by Fatima herself, that says, every human being's lineage goes through their fathers. Yes. With my chain, it comes to me. Yeah. Because Prophet Muhammad didn't have a son. So the lineage comes through the marriage between between Ali and Fatima. So in fact, Haydar Amuli honors Fatima and she puts her on top of the chain of awliya. I see the way that I see the diagram, it's not just for the formality or symbolicity. Really, he considers Fatima as one of awliya here.
Yeah.
Next to Prophet Muhammad, and then Ali, and it goes to the circle clockwise. That's what I thought. And it's visionary. He had 3 visions. In these 3 visions, exactly this image came to him in Khurasan, Baghdad, and Mashhad.
Yeah.
In Baghdad, this is the one that in Baghdad appeared to him near the Madrasa Mughisiya. He says, I was dreaming, and then in the dream, I was standing next to the bridge near Madrasa Mughisiya. Then I saw sky opened up, and a big plate and gold, shining gold, appeared to me in the vision, and I saw in small circles the name of Fatima, the name of Prophet, and the name of Ali till Mahdi, the one that is in occultation. And a voice said, these are the true awliyas, these are the manifestation of the divineness, and these are the ones that comes from the lineage of Prophet and will keep the order and balance of the world. And I am passing this vision to whomever willing to grasp and focus and work on it.
You know, I mean, this reminds me of something, and I'm now thinking maybe this is why it happened. So, you know, as you know, someone who's a very important teacher of Irfan, more recently, Hassanzadeh Amuli. Mm-hmm. So, you know, he wrote a commentary on the Fusus of his own, and he actually adds a chapter which is on Fatima.
On Fatima.
So the final chapter, I mean, a lot of people thought this was a bit strange, but now it seems like maybe he's actually getting this from Sayyid Haydar.
Yes, no, I mean,
so
it's
he
important.
He has a Fas Fatimiyya as the final kind of chapter to that commentary. And it's unusual. I don't think anyone's ever done that they've actually added to the Fusus in their commentary.
This really reflects his adherence and his loyalty and his love to Ahl al-Bayt, for sure. And also, as we spoke about diagrams, we see how Haydar Amuli makes ta'wil, going back to your term, makes ta'wil of Ibn Arabi's Fusus. In each chapter, Ibn Arabi talks about different divine attribute. He uses these diagrams, he gives his own understanding of these diagrams and the divine attributes. And what I really liked that he kept the door of this Mi'raj and journey open to humanity.
So, let me ask you one last question, which is a bit different, but it's related to these diagrams. And so, as we know, there is a different diagram that he uses elsewhere, where he represents the religions and the confessions that exist, very much based on, the scheme that we find in Shahrastani's Al-Bilal wal-Nihl. So what does this tell us about how he understands religion and the relationship between religions and confessions?
I saw two diagrams, I think diagram 21 and 22. He, in the text, very short passages. In fact, the passages that are translated or edited by Corban, it comes at segments. For each diagram, there are 2 or 3 segments that explains based on the information or the busyness of the diagram. So he refers to Shahrastani's sects and creeds, Milal wal Nahl, and he says, according to Shahrastani and according to Ghazali, he gives the definition that there are different categories of people. We have rulers, we have ulama, and we have ummiyah. That's one division. And according to Ghazali, again, we have believers, we have non-believers, then ulama. So he bases on what he read in Ghazali and Shahrastani's book. He has drawn these 2 diagrams. They are, if we think these are busy, the others are really busy. Each diagram reflects on 73 sects, 73 categories. And he says, Haydar Amuli says, there are overlaps between these sects. The first diagram talks about sects of Islam. And on that, the 4 major circle, again, it's a daira. There is 4 small circles. He has Ash'arite, he has Mu'tazilite, Shi'at, and Kharijit. And in between, he draws those 73, like Zaydis, different subcategories. Ismailis, Bukhras, many names. The other ones is for non-believers. Let me put it this way, non-Muslims. I would like to put it non-Muslim.
Yeah, so with
because they are people of books.
In terms of Shahrastanis, that would be, the first would be the Milal and the second would be the Nihl.
Nihl, yes, exactly. Thank you, yes. The second one, you have Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, and philosophers. He put philosophers on that diagrams, and again in between 73 sects, and they have overlaps among themselves, and they fit so Nahl, as you would say. I haven't done a lot of examination of those 2, but I found it interesting that even because the rest, there are many diagrams on Tawheed, Tawheed Uluhi, Tawheed Takwini. There are many diagrams on the last Imam, Al-Mahdi, just his position. So out of these 28 diagrams, the only one that mentions Fatima was this diagram that I mentioned. There are diagrams that talks about Shajara, the tree of divine attributes, which was very difficult. Even Corban mentions it, that he couldn't read. It wasn't clear. I tried to look at it. It's not, some of them are written, it's not coherent. So we can't really, maybe need another ta'wil to understand. But most of the diagrams are about divine attributes because he deals with, it's like Fusus al-Hikam. Everything comes from God through prophets, Nabi, they are Qutb, and they pass on this knowledge to awliya and the awliya to us. So this is his, if I want to really sum up, through these diagrams, he gives his own understanding of Fusus al-Hikam, making his own ta'wil and bringing some other secondary notes like Shahrastani's notes or Ghazali's notes on different sects.
Well, this has been wonderful, Eliza. Thank you very much for this. It's a very rich article, which I would definitely recommend people read. And I hope, you'll certainly, I'm sure, continue working on this and other kinds of texts. And then maybe in the future, once you have published something further on this, we can have a further conversation.
Thank you so much.
And discuss other aspects of Shi'i Sufism or Sufism more generally. So thank you very much for joining us. So thank you for those who are watching, and hopefully see you in the next episode.
Thank you.